Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Let's get moving. You've been sitting around for a little bit. I'm really excited to be here. Parents, graduates, Bodwell staff, Paul, shout out to you. Thank you for having me. This is kind of surreal. First of all, this day is all about you guys. It's all about you. Congratulations. You should be very proud of yourself. Round of applause for yourself. I remember this day. It was a lot smaller, and actually just the surreal part is I feel in many ways this was the graduation ceremony I never had because I skipped grade 7. So I don't really have a graduation ceremony. So my parents are actually here in the front. Mom and Dad, Sarah. So this is what it would have been like had I gone through normal high school. All right, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. Wanted to share just a few things about why there's a 12-year-old Asian guy on stage talking about mobile and business and how you can grow up and be successful. So I'll explain that. And then also dive into a few pointers that have just been things that have helped guide me in principle in how I've been able to build my business and then get to where I am today. So a quick background on me. Was born and raised in Vancouver. Went to high school actually at U Hill back when it was a tiny shack with 500 people. And then now it's this glorious glass building with brand new everything. So it's really, I drive by there and I'm super jealous because everybody from new stuff and I got all the old stuff. Then I actually skipped a bunch of grades. So I skipped grades 2, 7, 9, and 11. And that was, it's kind of crazy now that I think of all of it. It was all scattered and I did some gifted learning programs as well throughout the way. And then I graduated high school when I was 14 and then I went straight to UBC. I decided to go into commerce, which is where I met Boris. Y'all know Boris? Yeah. And was in commerce for 4 years, which apparently is fast now because the cool thing to do these days is 5 years in college, but I don't know. And then I ended up graduating with a commerce degree and immediately went down to San Francisco to actually work for another company called Dig. Now there are sort of 3 formative experiences that led to, I guess, just me being an entrepreneur. The first is hockey, the second is Singapore, and the third is losing my job. So let me quickly explain those 3. So hockey. So how does hockey play into this? You're probably wondering, this guy plays ice hockey? Well, I used to. I used to be very buff. I know, it's hard to believe. Yes, I played ice hockey for about 10 years, and I was the fast, agile one that was dodging everyone. Now, there was this one time, though, that I didn't dodge someone, and it was when I was 16. I was on a knee-on-knee hit, which actually fractured my lower femur, which is not a bone you're supposed to break. And it was obviously very painful. And I ended up being in a wheelchair for about a month and then was on crutches for a little while. Now during that time, I pretty much had nothing to do, so I decided there's truly 2 choices. I could either play a lot of video games or start a company. So I started a company. So I learned how to design actually much younger. I was 11 years old when I first pirated Photoshop. Because you can't really afford an $800 piece of software when you're young. So I decided to learn how to design on my own. So I had this design skill, and one of my buddies in college was like, hey, let's do some websites together and make some money off it. I was like, great. So I started a web design agency while I was in a wheelchair, and that's what kicked off my entrepreneurial career. Now, that was my first company, and Kiip is my second. So the second thing, the formative experience in kind of helping shape my worldview was when I went on exchange in college as well. So 3rd year, I went to Singapore, study abroad for a semester. Now I chose Singapore for various reasons. First is my Cantonese in any second language is pretty terrible, so I was like, Singapore speaks English, let's go there. And I figured I would learn more about Asia as a continent, and so I decided to go there. Now, when I arrived in Singapore, I figured out that they weren't really speaking English. It was like Singlish. For those of you who've been there, it's like English, but just totally different. And so I ended up being in Singapore for 6 months. I loved it so much, but part of what Singapore did for me is I grew up in Vancouver, much like, or not, I know some of you didn't grow up here. Now, Vancouver's a very comfortable city. You kind of got everything you want. So getting out and seeing the world was an amazing thing. It also got my parents used to me not living at home. So when I finally left, I went to San Francisco. I think it was a little easier. Now, Singapore also, I remember very distinctly being in Taipei. I was stuck in a typhoon, and I missed all my midterms the following week because I was super sick because I was running around in the rain. Don't ask me why. But that experience, just going and being able to just hop on a plane and go anywhere, kind of gave me this worldview. And we're so connected, and that feeling that you could be anywhere within 24 hours in the world is one that really makes us all a citizen of the world. It doesn't really matter kind of where now, it's what you do. And so that's what got me so excited about, again, building my company, making it global. I'm actually very excited to go back to Singapore next week, so it's going to be awesome. The third is, I mentioned getting laid off and losing my job. Now, I remember, I mentioned I graduated college at 18. I moved down to San Francisco, originally to work for a company called Dig. Dig was a big competitor to Reddit. I know you guys read Reddit. Dig was pretty cool a little while back. And then I got laid off from that company because they started to hit a wall, and I was without a job. Now, think about this. Graduated college, first job out of college, gets laid off. Not that great, especially my parents, right? So it's like, I kind of made this big hoopla, did a going away party and everything, and now I'm like coming back and I didn't have a job. Now, it wasn't my fault. It was obviously other people's faults, but that's what happens when you get laid off. It's not your job. It's not your fault. It's not like I sucked at my job, at least I think so. So I ended up without a job, but when you get stuck in these situations, and get stuck, I wasn't stuck. I was like, well, what do? I either could apply for more jobs or just create my own. And so I kind of knew how to do that because I had started my first company, so I was like, why not give it a try? And so I did that in 2010. So now 4.5 years later, we're 80 people in San Francisco, New York, Chicago, and LA. And we've raised about 20 million now in venture capital. And it's an honor to have a chance to build something that I'm very passionate about and something from scratch. Now, I wanted to share with you guys some things that have helped me along the way. That, again, you get so much advice thrown at you, and over the next few years, it's not going to stop. Everyone's going to go, be passionate, do what you love, be sure that you follow your own path, be unique, all these things. I'm going to pile onto that, but with my little twist. So, the first I wanted to share is sort of audacity differentiates. And what I mean by that is being different, being unique, everything that you do that isn't part of just what is your normal curriculum. A lot of things that are outside of school, things that are extracurriculars, everything that you're interested in that you pursue, these are the things that differentiate you, that make you different, that makes you indispensable. Now, what I've noticed is that we are so excited to build this foundation of knowledge when we graduate that we kind of get satisfied with that, and that continued curiosity, that desire to learn more, should never leave. In fact, that's one of my biggest fears, is that I ever lose my sense of curiosity, which I hope never happens, but that is what will drive you forever. Now, the fact that you're able to differentiate yourself, anything your friends even tell you, oh, you seem to be really good at this, like, you seem to be really good at photography, you seem to be really good at drawing, if you seem to be really good at this sport, whatever it might be, that should be the thing that you continue to hone in on. Now, a lot of the time when you're going through high school and even throughout college, you'll be told to fix your weaknesses, which is to an extent true, right? Now, there's some things that if you're very weak, I was pretty weak in finance and accounting. I know it's really weird, like I'm supposed to be good at math, but I wasn't, and I had to fix up some of that stuff to a basic level, but then now I have people that are really good at that do that instead of me, because if I were to do it, things would be run to the ground. So there are things that you have to realize when you look at your strengths and hone in on that, it'll help you continue to to sharpen that tool and make it very effective. My talent, what I know that I'm really good at, is I get people really excited about stuff. And that's what I do to sell, to build my company, to just push things forward and bring in investors as well. The second thing I wanted to share is sort of following a path. Again, like I said, there's paths that you will follow throughout life. School, college, getting your degree, things like that. But just remember, with everything you've done, and when you go through college, everyone that you're with is pretty much the same as you. You just graduated from school. When you're finished college or university, you're going to have your bachelor's degree. And those things on paper make you the same. Now, everything, like I said, that you do that is different will make you that person that people will remember. And again, that traveling experience for me when I went abroad was one, but there are many, many more that you can do. And these come from your internal talents, things that you notice that you really, really like. The third I wanted to share is think big. Think absolutely massive. And when I say that, it's not just thinking big in terms of what you want to do, but obviously there are things outside of what you've been told, and again, to the parents in the back, all cool. You only mean the best for your children. You told them about all the amazing jobs they can get, like a lawyer or a doctor or a politician or accountant or a banker. But I need you to know that 5 years ago, when well, actually no, it was way more than that. Oh my gosh, I feel old now. I'm 23, by the way. But anyways, 5 years ago, or more than that, the jobs that I thought that was applicable but super sexy are jobs that are probably not relevant now in terms of the technological improvements and changes that have happened, especially with the introduction of the smartphone. I'm sure many of you have seen some of the opportunities there. So what I'm saying is ultimately, there's this need to discover and look at job opportunities and things that are not necessarily something that you've been told about, that you could actually find very enjoyable. Now, I had never known that in Silicon Valley there was a whole area of expertise around product management, business development, things that I didn't even know existed, but having a chance to see it is enough. It's a chance to know that it at least exists. So that constant discovery and exploration is amazing. And remember, there's the whole world in front of you. Many of you have world perspectives that make you very unique, and that's what you need to be taking on as your core competency. So that's the next one, is take what makes you unique. Sometimes it even seems to appear, at least initially, as a weakness, right? So some people will ask me, you're very young. How do people take you seriously? I'm like, well, that's a leading question, because you think initially that people don't take you seriously. But the point is, you can take what is a weakness and actually turn it into a strength. And that's very much so a thing that for you, being worldly, being cultured, not from here, means that you actually have a different perspective. And you actually see things differently. You grew up differently. And that is ultimately what people like me, like employers, are looking for, is people who have very different perspectives, because that's how amazing ideas come about. If everyone thinks the same way, I don't want that. It's not useful to me. I want everyone to think differently. The next is asking is incredibly underrated. What I mean by that is, when you don't ask for help, how do people know how to help you, right? And so one of the things that's really guided me and has helped me build my business, do what I've done over the last 5 years, is the fact that I just ask for it. Now when you're young, there's one thing that happens. You look very benign. You're not really that threatening. So that means you can ask anything and you can learn as much as you can. You're a massive sponge. And people will teach you, they will share with you. This is ultimately the advantage that you have, is that people are wired to share, to pass along knowledge. And so the moment you ask, you will get answers. And actually, if you don't, usually that person's not someone you want to spend time with anyway, so it's kind of a good qualifier. But the point is, if you're able to ask and get the things that you want, just ask it. And people just don't do that. They sometimes wait for things to happen to them. But unfortunately, in this world, if you don't try to make that path ahead of you, and there's usually a difference in two types of people I notice. Of course, folks that have an external locus of control usually wait for everything around them to align until they can actually make a difference. Or someone who just goes, you know what, I can make it. Now, some of you may have seen this video, and I'm going to be cliche and quote Steve Jobs for a second, but I don't think he came up with it. It's more like a general thing. But there's a video of him younger, and he went, that moment you realize as a person that everything around you that you see, the floors, the ceiling, this process, the institution of school, the clothes you wear, was all created by another person. And you're a person. That's when your mind starts to explode, because you go, wow, everything that got created, someone else did it, so I'm a person too. I have these knowledges, this knowledge and skill. I could also create these things. I could change whatever I want Everything in front of you is malleable and is something that you can affect. That's what becomes unbelievably powerful. And that's one of the realizations that I had very early on, that to a degree went, well, into my business, and for those of you curious what it actually does, is we just embed rewards into the apps and games you use on your phone every day. And some of you might have gotten them. So let's say you leveled up in a game, you get like a free latte from Starbucks. And the reason why I created that was, well, no one here has ever tapped on a banner ad on their phone intentionally. No one has ever done that on purpose if you're a normal human being. And so that was a big problem. So I said, why is that still there? That has to be removed. That has to be changed. And so I decided, let's try to change it. And we're not even like 1/10 of the way there, but at least we're starting. So the next thing is, the little things matter. Now, again, you're in the middle of it, you're in the moment. So it probably won't sink in until 10 years later, but that's okay, as long as you remember, hopefully. There's these little things that I remember doing when I grew up, that at the time I was doing, I was like, oh, I have to wake up so early, I have to do this, and my parents are making me do this, and you just aren't thankful. You're not grateful at all. And then 10 years later you go, wow, like if they hadn't forced me to do this, I wouldn't be able to do this. So just remember that the things that your parents might make you do, or that you're being made to do by your teachers, or whatever it might be, these things, these little things make a huge. I'll give you an example. I did two things, well, there's many extracurriculars. In fact, I did too many extracurriculars growing up. My parents' philosophy was, the busier you are, the less opportunity you have to go off and do crazy things and get in trouble, which is a good theory, because it ended up working, because I had no time to have, do crazy things. Now, there's two things around. One was boys choir, so I sang in a choir. This was before my voice changed. I sounded like an angel. And then the second was speech art. So I actually did sort of like a version of improv. It's like drama, like reciting poetry in front of audiences. Now, those two things, at the time, I was like, oh, this is interesting. I guess it was fun. I wasn't like that, pained at that. But it was only till now, really the last 4 years, that I go, if it wasn't for that, my memory and reciting things and being able to stand in front of large audiences and present, and especially when I was presenting to investors and building our business and speaking at conferences, none of that stuff would have been able to come naturally had it not been for those things. But at the time, you don't realize it. So for you, there's many little things that you'll do that become you, becomes a huge part of your life, and becomes your assets as you grow up. So just remember, those little things will matter. And so the last thing I'll leave you with is this phrase I use a lot. I call it generate serendipity. And that basically is creating your own luck. Now, I like the word serendipity because it sounds really good. Now, the idea here is, how do you take your environment, find an environment as well that's conducive to your strengths. Now, I think it was Edison or someone, or Einstein, someone like that once said, you don't judge a fish by how well it climbs a tree. And I felt like a fish that was being judged on how it climbed a tree, quite honestly, here, because I had all these nerdy internet ideas, and I would have to repeat myself like 15 times, and no one would really understand what I was doing. And then when I went to Silicon Valley, which is like Nerdtopia, because everyone's a nerd, they go, wow, I get exactly what you're saying, this is amazing. And you don't have to explain it 3 times, I get it. And here's a lot of money to start. I'm kidding, it's not that easy. But that's how you need to find that environment that becomes that place where you can become the best you can be. And that's where these collisions happen. That's where serendipity occurs. You meet one person who believes in you, and that starts it all. There was one person I remember, and I'll leave you with this little anecdote. His name is Matt Van Horn. There's one person that when I first went down to Silicon Valley, I had emailed pretty much everyone I could find. By the way, if you want to get a hold of someone, just guess their email. It's really easy. In fact, a small tip, you put the best guess for their email in the to field, and then in the BCC field, you put every other permutation you can think of. And then they don't know that you were desperate and trying to contact them. They just see the first email and go, oh yeah, whatever, and they get the email. And then you know which ones didn't work when they bounce back. Point is, you can reach everyone you want in the world. Everyone has an email address. That's the good news. Well, not everyone, but mostly the people that you think would really be relevant would have one. And the point is, when you get to those people, they will either have two reactions. One is, I don't want to be with you, which it was not like it was any better than where you were when you were originally emailing in the first place. It's not like no was any different than the situation you were in. Or they'll say yes, which is amazing. So Matt was at Dig at the time. And he said yes. He said to come by, grab breakfast with me at 6:30 a.m. I remember. I flew down to San Francisco to have breakfast. And we had breakfast. And after that breakfast, he drove me over to the office. He introduced me to the CEO of the company, and that's when I got my first job. So there's always going to be these opportunities, these little things in life that will just align to you that are coming from serendipity, but only because you had brought yourself into that environment in the first place and put into motion these things that would create that potential success. And be there, be ready, and just have a lot of fun along the way. With that, congratulations again. I'm super honored to be here, and have an amazing day.
Wong for such a riveting speech. Now we have a couple of graduates who would like to ask you a couple questions.
Hello, Brian. So back in the time you were in universities or even high schools, you were younger than most of your classmates. So my question is, how did you encounter any social challenges and how do you solve them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm proud to say that I never once got shoved in a locker. And I think just because I look so harmless and so adorable, everyone's like, oh, I don't want to harm them. It's like the puppy mentality, you know? But I think most of it is, I kind of was mentioning before that sometimes the perceived intelligence and maturity sometimes becomes a shield, helps people take you more seriously. There's going to be little antics that bullies will pull, things like that, but sometimes it just makes you stronger. And so I think part of what I was able to do to combat that was just continue to be myself. Now this is another quote that, you know, be yourself because everyone else is taken, right? Realize that there's all these people that are there to try to change you. And you'll know, by the way, and at this point in life, you've probably figured out at least sort of the general gist of who you are. I know some of you feel like you're still figuring it out, but trust me, at this age you're pretty cool now. The idea is make sure that that is who you preserve, and that the moment you try to step out of that skin, it just feels very unnatural. So for me, I just wanted to continue to stay who I was. I didn't want anyone to change me.
Thank you, this is very helpful.
Very brave of you for coming up with these questions, and I get them to prepare these things, right? So thank you.
So now that you're so successful at such a young age, what's next for you?
So I'm not so successful at such a young age, just so you know. I think part of what's interesting is at this point, everything becomes relative. So I like to say that I'm very happy, but I'm never satisfied. It's one of the curses as well sometimes when you are an entrepreneur is this constant desire. Nothing is ever perfect. And sometimes striving for perfection drives you mad, which is what happens to a lot of entrepreneurs. So what's next for me, I don't even think about that. I mean, my 100% focus is on the company I'm running today. Now, I do know one thing I want to share this bit with you. Someone once said to me too, like, don't try to create a to-do list, right? Try to create a to-feel list, to-be list. Right? That's very different than the things that you end up doing. Now, how you feel is ultimately what will help you accomplish and feel like you've accomplished something. Now, like I said, to a certain extent, a few of those feel list items for me have been crossed off, but there's many, many more to come. So, in many ways, success is relative, and there will always be someone better than you, more good-looking, more successful, more wealthy, and that's how I continue to feel that motivation to push forward and continue to do more.